All right, so we're live. First live stream in a little while. Figured I would do one of these because I haven't done a live stream in quite a quick minute. So I'm gonna wait for people to get onto the live here and view it, but just for generalization, the theme of today's live and the topic is definitely going to be jigs. Going over the 4 different types of jigs you can choose from, and the trailers, how to fish them, whatnot. So I'll give everybody a few seconds here to go ahead and get on here. I'm not sponsored by Mountain Dew, but Mountain Dew is amazing. Give everybody a second. I'll go to about 3 or 4 minutes here. Just wait for everybody to get on. So the 4 different types of jigs we're going to be talking today is swim jigs, flipping jigs, football jigs, and finesse jigs. And then we're going to be talking about the trailers that you would normally want to use with these 4 different types of jigs. And later on in the video, we're also going to go over my jig arsenal, and we're also going to be going like the jigs I carry in my backpack. And then we're going to be going over techniques and gear that you want to fish them on. So it's going to be a good live. So what I'm going to go do real quick, actually, now that I remember, while I wait for people to get on here, I'm going to go grab the gear so that way I can show you guys later on. Alright. I can grab my gear. I'll give it about, I'd say, 1 more minute for people to get on here. I'm going to adjust the curtains so that way it's not so hot in here. There we go. Now we have a little bit of a different lighting situation. It's a little better, I think. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start. Anybody that's not on the chat yet or on the stream, they can get on. So, very first jig we're going to talk about is probably the most basic type of jig, and that is the flipping jig. Now, flipping jigs are great. You can fish them around basically any type of cover: grass, wood, rocks, soft cover, hard cover, it'll do it, because generally a flipping jig has a beefier hook and it has a very, very stiff weed guard. Now, these range in all different sizes, this type of jig. But we're going to talk about what's important real quick, is the head. As you can see, it's a big, thick head on that bait. Nice, big, thick head. That's going to help it sit on the bottom right where it should. And it's also going to be a little bit heavier of a jig. Generally, a flipping jig is going to be heavier than all the other jigs. So you can get flipping jigs all the way from a 1/4 ounce all the way up to 1 ounce. Generally, my most used for flipping jigs is I'm either going to use a 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce. 3/8 ounce if I'm just if I'm not casting very far, I'll go with the 3/8 ounce. if I'm not having to make far casts or whatever, and if I'm fishing shallower. If I'm fishing deeper and have to make farther casts, I'll go ahead and go with a 1/2 ounce. But so the jig right here that I'm talking about is the Strike King Hack Attack flipping jig. It's probably my favorite. Good for the money. Good skirt flare on them. And we'll talk about trailers in a little bit. But yeah, that's a flipping jig. Very, very common type of jig here. The next jig we're going to talk about is the swim jig. Now, swim jigs are great. You're probably going to want to fish them a little bit differently. So a swim jig like this is really, really great because the swim jig is made for grass. A lot of people will call them grass jigs. It's got a lighter wire weed guard, as you can see, a very, very light weed guard, and usually a lighter wire hook. Their skirts are usually a one-piece design. They don't have two different pieces of the skirt coming out. Trailers are definitely different on these, and the head design is what makes the swim jig different. So I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but it's a really nice narrow angled head design, and what that does is it allows this bait to swim through cover like grass, weeds, a lot better. Generally, I try to stay away from hard cover like branches, sticks, logs, whenever I'm fishing a swim jig. Mainly because it's going to get hung up a lot easier because it's got a lighter weed guard and a lighter wire hook. It's going to slip into that wood a lot easier. Generally, with a swim jig, you're trying to imitate some sort of bait fish. Not necessarily crawfish. Generally, you're either imitating shad, bluegill, brim, all that good stuff. So generally, I'm either getting white or green pumpkin for the colors. White to imitate shad, green pumpkin to imitate the bluegill and the sunfish. And you're definitely going to want to use a swimming type trailer on these. And I'll go over the trailer options here in a little bit. Let's talk about weight real quick. When it comes to a swim jig, I'm using two different sizes for the most part. I'm using a 1/4 ounce or a 3/8 ounce. Same with the flipping jig. I'm going to use the 1/4 ounce when I'm making target casts. I'm not casting too far from shore or off the boat. And if I'm going to be, fishing in 1 to 3 feet of water, I'll go ahead and go with a 1/4 ounce. If I'm fishing deeper water, heavier structure, I need to cast farther, I'm going to go with a 3/8 ounce. This one here is a 3/8 ounce swim jig, Strike King tour grade swim jig. Really, really great swim jig. Okay, let's talk about the third type of jig, and that is going to be a football jig. Now, a football jig is called a football jig for obvious reasons. The head is shaped like a football, and what that's going to do is it's going to keep that bait from falling side to side, dropping things here, and it's also going to keep that bait, it's also going to keep your jig on the bottom a lot better. It'll wedge into things, and actually with that football design is what will happen. When your jig's on the bottom, it'll roll up like this and make those claws on your trailer stand up in a defensive position. Generally, I'm going to be fishing a football jig around gravel. So when there's a lot of fine rock around, sand, anything I need to stir up, points, I'm going to be throwing a football jig. Has a pretty big profile on them usually. Usually a medium weed guard, so not too heavy wire. Same with the hook, not an extremely heavy wire hook, but they generally just have an average hook. But yeah, same thing with the flipping jig. You're going to try to imitate crawfish. Sorry, my grandma's coughing. You're going to want to imitate crawfish. And we'll talk about the trailers in a sec. The third type of jig, and this is probably my least used jig type that I'll use, and that's only because I really only use them during the colder months, and that is a finesse jig. Now you can see, sorry guys. Okay, sorry for that interruption. We have a finesse jig. This is probably the jig. Just a second. This is probably the type of jig that you're going to want to throw in the winter months. Just a sec. Okay. Like I was saying, this is the jig you're going to want to throw in the winter months when it's cold, like, you know, November, January, December, February, whatever. Because these jigs have a slimmer profile and they pop in and out of the rocks really well. I'm only usually, these are really seasonal. The only time I'm ever using a finesse jig is seasonally, so like colder months, cold water. These work really, really well. Okay, let's talk about trailers for a second. So for trailers, generally when I'm fishing a flipping jig or a football jig or a finesse jig, I'm going with this style of trailer right here. And these are all chunk style trailers. So this right here is a Zoom Super Chunk Junior. This one here is in black and blue. Black and blue, green pumpkin. The reason I like these is because they help imitate crawfish. They got claws on there. Also, I like the action on these chunks because it's very subtle. It has action, but it's very subtle. When you're fishing a moving type jig, like a swim jig, I like to use the Zoom Swimming Chunk. It's got a couple grub legs on there, and they kick water, and they move, they flow in the water. Because a lot of times when I'm fishing a swim jig, I'm going to be popping it while I'm reeling, starting my retrieve. So that really, really, really helps. All right, let's talk about the gear that you want. Fishing rods right here. So as for the rod, this goes for any of these jigs here. I don't like to go too light. I don't like to go too heavy with my jig fishing. So generally I'm fishing a 7-foot medium heavy power fast action. I feel like heavy's a little bit too heavy because I don't live in Texas. I don't live in Florida where you have 9-pound bass in ponds and whatever like that. I do not feel like you need to fish any of these jigs on a heavy power fast action rod. I feel like that's a little bit overkill. So I like to use a 7-foot medium heavy power fast action rod. This one here is by Lew's. This is the Lew's Xfinity Pro Speed Stick IM8. Really, really great rod. You also want a rod with a little bit of backbone in it, so I like these rods. They're a little bit thicker. As for a reel, I like a faster gear ratio reel unless I'm being forced to slow down. So if the bass are in a really slow mood and I need to fish slow, then I'll pull out a slower gear ratio reel. But this reel right here, this is a Lew's Tournament MP Speed Spool LFS. It's in a 7.5 to 1 gear ratio, so it's a little bit fast. It's what I like. And for line, I like 30-pound braided line. I'm using Spider Wire Easy Braid. And I always use a fluorocarbon leader, and when I'm fishing a jig, again, don't like to go too light, don't like to go too heavy on my leaders. Sorry, guys. A bug got in my mouth. But yeah, I don't like to go too heavy, don't like to go too light on my leaders, so I like a 17-pound fluorocarbon leader, and I tie that on with the improved outright knot or the Alberto knot. One thing I do recommend to do to the rods you're fishing your jigs on is add some extra grip. These are the rod grips that I got from Amazon. They're pretty cheap, but they allow you to grip that rod on a hook set. That's another thing I want to talk about is hook set. When you're fishing a jig, and this goes for all jigs, I want to show you. If you're fishing a bait that has a weed guard and you need to get that hook to penetrate that weed guard, you're going to have to give them the business with a hook set. I know a lot of people don't like to set the hook hard and stuff like that. If you don't like to set the hook hard, then a jig is not for you because you're not going to catch any fish if you don't set that hook hard. So if you don't like setting the hook hard, get out of your comfort zone, and you're going to have to learn to do it, or else don't fish a jig. That's all I can say. Same with the topwater frog, but we'll get into that in a different video. So I like a heavy hook set. I don't like an extremely powerful hook set to the point where you're about to break your rod. I do when I'm fishing a frog, but when I'm fishing a jig, you don't have to set the hook like you're about to, like you're swinging a bat or anything. You just want to set the hook hard enough to get that weed guard in their mouth. So that is the gear that I choose to fish jigs on for the most part. If I'm being forced to slow down, I will go down to a lower gear ratio. All right, so let's talk about my jig arsenal. So what jigs do I carry with me on a daily basis when I'm out on the water? Start out with swim jigs. I carry 2 different colors of swim jig. For the most part, we'll start with these guys here. I carry white as a color. These are all Strike King tour grade swim jigs. I carry 2 white ones, both with Zoom swim and chunk trailers. I have a 1/4 ounce and a 3/8 ounce. You can see the difference on the head. Great for imitating shad. I will also use green pumpkin. 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce green pumpkin. Great for imitating bluegill and sunfish, both with swim and chunk trailers. Okay, that's all I have for swim jigs. Flipping jigs. I got quite a few flipping jigs that I carry with me when I fish. Let's go with the green pumpkin first. Go over the green pumpkin first. So, I love the Hack Attack flipping jigs. So, where did I put the Hack Attack? There we go. I like Strike King Hack Attack flipping jigs, so I have a 1/2 ounce, 3/8 ounce green pumpkin, both with Zoom Super Chunk Juniors. And then I have another green pumpkin one. This one here I like fishing at night. This is a Booyah Boo jig with a Christy crawl on the back, 1/2 ounce. Carry 2 of those. For black and blue flipping jigs, I have, let's see, a couple of Hack Attack flipping jigs. I got 1/2 ounce, 3/8 ounce Zoom Super Chunk Juniors, and then I have another Booyah Boo jig in black and blue with the Christy crawl on the back, and these are both rattling jigs here, the Booyah Boo jigs. Okay, and I gotta find that 3/8 ounce Hack Attack. I gotta let that one dry. Okay, that's for flipping jigs. All right. Let's move on to football jigs real quick. Carry 3 football jigs with me, 3 different colors, same size. I got 1/2 ounce green pumpkin, Zoom Super Chunk Junior trailer. These all have Zoom Super Chunk Juniors on them. I have black and blue. I have Texas Crawl, which is an interesting color. It's got a little chartreuse in it. Okay. And as for finesse jigs, I only carry 2 finesse jigs with me because I don't fish them very often. So I have green pumpkin 1/4 ounce, and then black and blue 1/8, both with Zoom Super Chunk Juniors on them. So that is what I carry for jigs. So I carry quite a few jigs with me because I'm a big fan of fishing jigs. Hope you guys enjoyed this live stream. Just wanted to go over some jigs, jig fishing, whatever, because it's been catching me some good fish this year, so I can't complain. And without further ado, I'll catch you guys again on the next stream or video. This is BassKicker, signing off. Bye, guys.